John Wayne Gacy was a prolific American serial killer who terrorized the state of Illinois in the 1970s. Known for his predilection for wearing clown costumes, getting involved in the community, and most notably, killing at least 25 young men. Not only his crimes were gruesome and horrific, his life itself was pretty bizarre. Among the true stories about John Wayne Gacy, who was executed on the 10th of May 1994 after receiving the death penalty for his crimes in 1980, is the fact his brain was saved for medical research purposes. There were so many unbelievable things that happened in the John Wayne Gacy case that they are so odd they can only be true. John Wayne Gacy's first murder was in 1975. Whilst it's unclear he attempted killing anyone before this time, he did sexually assault, or attempted to, several young boys he knew through community groups or work. In total, police believe he killed 33 people. His first victim, 17-year-old John Bukovich, was an employee who came to Gacy's house asking for back pay. Gacy strangled him to death and then buried him underneath his house. Gacy began murdering exponentially. His wife divorced him and he left him alone in his house, giving him plenty of time to pick up young men. Many of them were employees of his contracting company, others he abducted off the street and at bus stops. His last victim, 15-year-old Robert Peast, was lured to his house by the prospect of a job. After killing his young victims by strangling them to death, he buried their bodies in the crawl space under his house and around his garage. His neighbours suspected that something odd was going on, and they would see him removing trash bags or dirt and even digging in his yard. But no one seemed to believe that a man who was so involved with his community could possibly be burying the bodies of his victims despite the smell. At least two people had some knowledge Gacy was digging underneath his house. Gacy employed two young men, Michael Rossi and David Cram, who were instructed to spread lime underneath the house to mitigate how damp it was. Cram said he saw holes in the ground that were about the size of graves. While living in Norwood Park, Illinois in the 1970s, Gacy became involved in a local group called the Jolly Jokers. The men dressed up like clowns and went around entertaining children at hospitals. They also went to children's parties, ostensibly to make the birthday boy or girl laugh, not cower in fear. Gacy's clown personas were Patches the Clown and Pogo the Clown. After his arrest, this led to the nickname the Killer Clown. Gacy allegedly told psychiatrists after his arrest he thought of Pogo as a good and evil character. There was a side of Pogo he called Compassion Clown and another called Hatred Clown. He could turn to be the good version of the clown or the bad. In one case, he recalled cussing out the child who lied to him about not getting any candy at a birthday party before he skipped off in a jovial manner. Even when he killed, he would do one of the tricks he used during clowning, which involved getting out a pair of handcuffs. He challenged his victims to do the same, essentially trapping them. In 2012, years after Gacy's execution, witnesses came forward saying they believed he had at least one accomplice, possibly one of the employees. The revelation came after the friends of John Mowry, one of Gacy's victims, came forward. They said an unidentified man who knew Gacy moved into Mowry's apartment complex days before he disappeared. The man said he knew the house where the bodies were buried underneath, and he was a former employee of Gacy's. The day after Mowry's murder, Gacy was at a job in Michigan, leading lawyers to believe he had helped disposing of his bodies. They suspect at least 3 of Gacy's murders happened with accomplices because he couldn't have time to move around the dead bodies based on his work schedule. One of his victims, Robert Gilroy, disappeared while Gacy was in Pittsburgh. Another, Russell Nelson, was nabbed outside of a bar. They doubt Gacy could have overpowered the man by himself. Gacy's father, John Sr., was an extremely abusive man who used to ruthlessly beat his son in drunken rages. At school, he was also ridiculed, adding to his anxiety. Because of a congenital heart issue, Gacy wasn't allowed to play sport or engage in physical activity when he was a kid. That, coupled with his discovery he was bisexual, made him extremely isolated from his family and friends. In 1962, Gacy escaped the clutches of his physically and mentally abusive father and moved to Las Vegas. While there, he spent 3 months working as a janitor and found he enjoyed being around dead bodies. He reportedly slept on a cot near the morgue during his stay and even ventured into the coffin of a deceased young man lying down beside his body. After a few months, Gacy realised his love for the job produced weird feelings, so he called his mother and asked her to help him come back home. Despite having a terrible childhood, Gacy actually became fairly successful. He ran a chain of Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa. During his time in Norwood Park, Illinois, Gacy started his own business. He called it PDM, short for painting, decorating, and maintenance. In Iowa, Gacy became involved in the local JCs, short for United States Junior Chamber. Gacy was such a successful JC that he was named the third most outstanding JC in his state back in 1965. He was truly dedicated to the cause. Ironically, he isn't the only serial killer to be the former member of the organisation. Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer, was one as well. Gacy's civic-mindedness extended to his local Democratic Party in Illinois too. He became an assistant precinct captain in mid-1970s, which is also an electable position. Gacy also served on the Norwood Park Township Street Lighting Committee, and his neighbours highly respected him. In May 1978, he served as a leader of Chicago Polish Constitution Day parade. Part of his job involved inviting a celebrity to take part in the parade festivities, so he reached out to the White House and got Rosalind Carter to come to Chicago. He managed to pass the required Secret Service background check to get close enough to her to have his picture taken with her. In 1967, Gacy was living in Iowa and started to give in to his desires. He lured several teenage boys into his house under the guise of homosexual experiments. One of those boys was Donald Voorhees, the son of his fellow JC Club members. Voorhees told his dad what had happened, and Gacy was arrested. Gacy maintained his innocence, saying that Voorhees was a rival who wanted to ruin his political aspirations. In fact, Gacy had many supporters after his original arrest because many believed an upstanding citizen like him was innocent. He pleaded guilty to sodomy and spent 18 months in prison. During part of his pre-trial examinations, he was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder by 2 different psychiatrists. Despite this, he was never placed on any sort of treatment program. Despite multiple appeals, Gacy was put to death on the 10th of May 1994. He was killed via lethal injection at the Stateville Penitentiary in Joliet, Illinois. According to his lawyers, Gacy was chatty and jovial before his death, even cracking jokes. Gacy's elaborate last meal included 12 fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe KFC chicken, fries, and a pound of strawberries. His lawyer Karen Conti later said he requested the strawberries as a joke because they were out of season. While in prison awaiting his execution, Gacy started a new hobby, painting. However, he didn't paint pretty landscapes or nice still lives, he painted clowns. Creepy pictures of clowns that were displayed at Chicago Art Gallery and sold upwards of $4,500. He also painted religious art, disturbing self-portraits, and works inspired by other serial killers, such as a skull he called Dharma Skull. Gacy had 2 children with his first wife, Marilyn Myers, a son named Michael, and a daughter named Christine. After Gacy was arrested for sodomy in 1968, his wife filed for divorce and received full custody of their children. He married again in 1972 to a woman named Carol Hoff, who had 2 daughters, making him a stepfather. That marriage failed in 1976. Gacy never went to high school, but he somehow managed to enroll in and graduate from the Northwestern Business College. He received his degree in 1963 and began his career working as a management trainee for the Nunn Bush Shoe Company. Later on, he managed several KFCs and started a general contracting business. It could be said that he had the skills required to work with people, even the ones that he picked up and murdered.